Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to really get into the news that matters. And today, well, it's a significant one. We're diving deep into that recent massive missile and drone attack on Kyiv. It's definitely a heavy topic. We understand that. But our aim here is to sort of cut through the noise, give you the critical info and context, make sure you're informed without, being overwhelmed. Our main source for this is a report from The Guardian titled Massive Russian Missile and Drone Attack on Kyiv Kills at Least 12 People. We'll use that as our jumping off point. We want to look at the immediate tragedy, yes, the human cost, but also step back and ask, what does this signal, in the wider conflict, international diplomacy? Think of this as getting you the layers beneath those headlines. Okay, so let's unpack this. The report paints a picture of a really significant attack. It happened overnight, August 28th, 2025. People had strikes from the city center after 3 a.m. and then again around 5:30 a.m. That's sustained nature. Yeah. The Guardian called it the most deadly night raid on the Ukrainian capital for several weeks. That phrasing alone tells you this was different. An escalation.
Yeah.
And the human cost. It's just, well, heartbreaking, isn't it? The reports confirmed at least 12 people killed. What really hits hard is that 3 children were among them, ages 2, 14, and 17. Just awful. Timur Tkachenko, he's the head of Kyiv's military administration. He confirmed a 14-year-old girl and another child were killed. And on top of the deaths, dozens wounded. The count was 45 injured so far when the report came out. It really shows the terror inflicted on civilians. And the damage wasn't just one spot. They reported impacts at more than 20 locations, 20 different places across Kyiv, including part of a 5-story building in eastern Kyiv just destroyed. The immediate response, Ihor Klimenko, the Interior Affairs Minister, mentioned 3 people were rescued from the rubble. And rescue efforts were still ongoing, searching for others. You can just imagine the scene.
It's truly devastating. And what's particularly striking, looking at the details in the report, isn't just the scale, but the types of weapons used. They mentioned ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and Shahed drones.
Right, all 3 together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This wasn't random. The report calls it massive and coordinated. That combination is very deliberate. To understand the, let's say, strategic thinking, you have to look at what each weapon does.
Okay.
So Shahed drones, for instance, they're relatively low cost, slower, often used in waves. The idea can be to just overwhelm air defenses, right? Make them use up interceptors or act as decoys.
Right.
Then you have ballistic missiles. These are incredibly fast, high trajectory, very tough to intercept once they're coming down. They send a message of, well, overwhelming force. Can hit high-value targets or just cause panic.
And cruise missiles?
Cruise missiles offer precision, long range. They often fly low, trying to evade radar detection. More about hitting specific targets accurately.
So using all 3, it's like a layered attack.
Precisely. It suggests a multi-pronged strategy. You probe defenses, maybe exploit weaknesses, definitely maximize the psychological shock, and inflict different kinds of damage simultaneously. It's resource intensive, It's not just a pinpoint strike. It's meant to overwhelm, degrade. Which really brings up the question, why now? Why this kind of attack at this moment?
That is the crucial question, isn't it? And it leads us right into the next layer here, because like you said, why now? This didn't just happen out of the blue. The report points out something interesting about the timing. It mentions that aerial attacks on Kyiv had actually been relatively muted during August. So there was this period of comparative calm, almost like a lull. But what else happened in August? The same report highlights that U.S. President Donald Trump made a failed attempt to bring about an end to the war by meeting his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, in Alaska. So you have, on the one hand, this quiet period in terms of attacks on Kyiv, and then this very public but ultimately unsuccessful diplomatic push. It's quite contrast.
It really is.
Yeah.
And connecting those dots, the timing feels, well, suggestive. It could indicate a shift in strategy or perhaps a very deliberate message. You have this relative quiet, then a major diplomatic effort fails, and then comes this sudden, deadly escalation. As the source describes it, it certainly sends a powerful signal.
A signal of what, do you think?
Well, it makes you wonder if events on the battlefield are being used as direct responses to diplomatic moves or failures. Historically, sometimes you see military escalations right after diplomacy stalls or breaks down.
Right.
It could be interpreted a few ways. Maybe it's asserting strength, showing resolve after talks failed, maybe trying to sort of change the facts on the ground to influence future talks. A failed summit, especially one involving a major leader like President Trump, might be seen as a moment to reset the narrative through force. It could be signaling, perhaps, a lack of interest in negotiating peace on the terms that were being discussed, or just a raw show of force aimed not just at Ukraine, but maybe at international players pushing for ceasefire too. It's a loud statement, clearly intended to echo beyond Kiev itself.
That makes a lot of sense. Less like coincidence, more like communication through action, however brutal. Which brings us to the international reaction. What did this mean globally? President Zelensky's response was very clear, very forceful, according to the report. He didn't just condemn the attack itself, he framed it, interpreted it. He put out a statement on social media, quoted in the report, saying, "These Russian missiles and attack drones today are a clear response to everyone in the world who, for weeks and months, has been calling for ceasefire and for real diplomacy." And he added, quite bluntly, "Russia chooses ballistics instead of the negotiating table." That's a very direct accusation.
Extremely direct. He's explicitly linking the military act to a rejection of diplomacy, throwing down a gauntlet, really, to anyone advocating for talks at that moment.
And Ukraine didn't stop there. They called for a tangible international response. Zelensky specifically asked for more sanctions against Russia. And significantly, he directly called out China. The report quotes him. "We expect a reaction from China to what is going on. China has repeatedly called for not expanding the war and for a ceasefire."
That's a bold move, putting China on the spot like that.
It really is, especially given the other piece of timing the report mentions concerning China. Apparently, just hours before Zelensky's statement, Beijing had announced that President Putin would be attending a military parade with President Xi Jinping in Beijing the following week.
Wow. Okay.
So you have Ukraine demanding China react to this devastating attack based on China's own calls for peace, while China is simultaneously preparing to host the leader whose forces, according to Ukraine, just carried out that attack. The diplomatic pressure there feels immense.
Immense is the right word. That convergence of events really highlights the complexities, the intricate web of global relations, doesn't it? Zelensky's direct appeal to China, especially with Putin's visit looming, as the report lays out, it just cranks up the diplomatic tension.
How so? What does it mean for China?
Well, China has consistently tried to walk this line, right? Position itself as somewhat neutral, calling for peace, stability, non-expansion of the conflict. But an attack like this, followed by such a direct challenge from Zelensky, it forces a very public moment of reckoning for that stance.
They can't easily ignore it.
Exactly. The stakes for Beijing are incredibly high. They have crucial economic and strategic ties with Russia, obviously. But they also want to maintain their image as a responsible global power, and crucially, not alienate key trading partners, particularly in the West.
So what are their options?
It's tricky. If China stays silent, or just issues a very generic, bland statement, it risks looking like tacit approval of Russia's actions. That could undermine its diplomatic credibility, make its own calls for peace seem hollow.
But condemning it strongly.
Could definitely strain the relationship with Russia, especially right before this high-profile state visit.
Yeah.
It puts Beijing in a really uncomfortable spotlight.
Yeah.
They're forced to weigh their geopolitical interests against their stated principles very publicly, very immediately. The report just lays out the facts, the timeline, the statements.
Yeah.
And it lets us see that direct link, how military action can pressure the diplomatic sphere, and how a major power like China gets caught in these powerful crosscurrents. Whatever China decides to do, or maybe not do, it's going to send ripples everywhere. It could signal a shift in their approach, or maybe just reinforce the tightrope they're already walking.
It's a really fascinating, though obviously deeply troubling moment unfolding on the world stage. And that really brings us towards the end of this deep dive for today. We've covered quite a bit. We started with the immediate tragic devastation in Kyiv, the specifics of the attack, the heartbreaking human toll, those young lives lost. Then we looked at the context, the timing, how it followed that relative quiet period and that failed diplomatic effort in Alaska. And we just explored the international fallout, Zelensky's strong reaction, and that crucial focus on China, especially given Putin's upcoming visit. So what this deep dive really shows, I think, is not just the terrible human cost, but also these complex, sometimes brutal signals being sent through military actions on the global stage. It really makes you think, doesn't it? In a world where diplomacy and force are so tangled up, how do events like this change how we understand negotiation? What does it actually mean for the parties involved? And maybe for you listening, what does it mean to witness these actions, these reactions? Something to keep mulling over, keep learning, and keep diving deeper with us.